Good afternoon, everyone. I am pleased to be joining you on this third media slash wars or media wars episode. And we have a number of very insightful speakers and guests that we will be speaking with. I would like to welcome Assal Rad with us, who has been a fixture, actually, not just of addressing the war in Iran, but also the previous wars and massacres and genocide in the past few years. And Asal is with us, of course, and Mouin, my co host. Let me just say to both of you, ahlan wa sahlan. All right. I was expected an answer. Yalla, let's just get to it. Um, Asal, we know we're trying to, we have a limited time, and we would love for you to share with us a broad stroke approach to how you are witnessing the mainstream media in the United States, but also other media and beyond the United States, if you will, has covered or handled the war in Iran, but also everything that's been happening in terms of Israel and the United States and their adventures and wars on various countries.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think if you have been following, especially my personal critiques on the media's coverage of Gaza and the Gaza genocide, you can see the parallels in how that coverage applies to Iran, it applies to Lebanon, it applies to what's happening in the occupied West Bank. Because ultimately, what you're seeing is a media that presents itself as a free press that's supposed to be challenging those in power, making sure that they're giving us the truth of what's going on. And in reality, it's filtered through a lens of US foreign policy. And by extension, because Israel is an ally of the United States, I mean, really its closest ally in many ways in terms of the way that it protects Israel, it by extension, it does the same thing for Israel. So what you see is typically a repetition of Israeli and US talking points rather than real investigative journalism. And that's not to say that it doesn't happen at all. And as an example, the New York Times had a great investigative piece on after the elementary school in Iran, the Manab school, was hit, and you had over 150 children that were killed. And initially, and this should sound familiar, initially, who did they try to blame? They tried to blame Iran for having bombed its own elementary school. This is exactly this was very, very early, I think the second day of the war. It reminded me of the Al Ahli hospital incident in Gaza in October of 2023, where as soon as you have this sort of mass atrocity event and it's getting all of this public attention and backlash, the immediate response is to blame not the perpetrators of the war, but in the case of Al Ahli, it was Hamas, and in the case of Iran, it was blaming Iran as an errant missile hit it. Now, the New York Times had a great investigative piece that showed no, this was a U.S. missile that hit. But what was interesting about that piece is the headline was terrible. The headline for the piece was terrible. You had to, if you have a subscription, you could read the entire investigation. It had a lot of great information in it. But if you just read the headline, it made it seem like, well, maybe it was a U.S. missile that hit this school while they were actually hitting all of these military targets. So again, you see that softening of language rather than a headline that speaks to the atrocity that is happening, which is you just killed over 150 children, girls aged 7 to 12. That is a war crime. There's no question about these things. When did it stop being a war crime to bomb elementary schools? So just think about the way that it would be presented if it was in reverse. If there was a US or Israeli elementary school that was bombed by Iran, the difference in the way these facts are presented is the problem. And you can see this across the board. You see it in Lebanon, these constant headlines that say things like Israel is targeting Hezbollah, except for the fact that the image of children and women and innocent men, civilians that are being killed, journalists, medics, the same patterns that we saw in Gaza. I mean, southern Lebanon is being demolished completely. It's being flattened. That's not targeting Hezbollah. That is targeting civilian infrastructure and the ability of Lebanese people to live in their own land. So this is what's happening across the board. And all the while right now, what's being underreported is Gaza, which is in part what the strategy of Israel is. create more chaos and more wars, and they'll forget about the fact that the genocide is not over. There is a genocide ongoing in Gaza, but there is barely any coverage of Gaza anymore.
Actually, Assal and Mouin, we must break for just a moment because I have Ali Hashem on the line from Tehran, who's able to speak right now after his live. So I'm gonna go to him, and it's gonna be on WhatsApp. So there's no way to bring it in here, and then I'll come back to you. Is that okay?
That sounds great.
All right.
Sounds fine.
1 second. 1 second.
مرحبا، كيفك؟
اهلا وسهلا.
شو اخبارك؟ ان شاء الله ماشي الحال.
ماشي الحال، انت كيفك؟
رواه الحمد لله ماشي الحال.
Ali Hashem, at this point you are beyond an introduction, but I wanted to ask you, given your unparalleled sort of journalism and access in Lebanon, and now you are in Tehran, if you can just give us the lay of the land, especially today, but also how we arrived at today, where there's an extension of what is called a ceasefire, and I don't know, no one knows actually what these things mean anymore. So if you can tell us what the view looks like from Tehran.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, Sam. And I'm trying my best to report from here with whatever available resources. Now, the situation is too much complicated, especially that we are dealing with an administration in the United States that seems to be not really grasping what's happening here in Iran. So what we're reading from DC, what we're hearing from President Trump, doesn't relate to what is going on in Iran. So speaking about a fractured system, or seeing some sources telling Axios that there are warring factions in Iran, gives you an impression you are in Beirut 1980s or in Mogadishu or in Afghanistan, while we are actually in a country that is and seems to be in a very solid position right now. Regardless what we think of the system here, but it's clear that the leadership has consolidated power. It's there. It's the team that is surrounding the new supreme leader is functioning. Decision-making process is going on, and the country is actually moving. So what we're hearing from outside is just giving you the impression that it's either that there are advisors who do not understand what's going on here, or there is a kind of on-purpose misleading to the president to improvise more and more and to take wrong decisions more and more. And this is not in the favor of anyone, neither the United States or Iran nor the region, because this could create more and more reasons for this situation of war to resume at any time and for any silly reason. So why we are here right now? We are here right now because there was a war and there was no solution till the moment. There have been attempts by the Pakistanis, by several other mediators to reach to a situation where they can bridge the gaps. However, what we are right now dealing with isn't the gaps, it's themselves. We're dealing with a situation where to bring the Iranians to the table, not what the Iranians are going to talk on the table. So this is the issue. So we're not dealing with, let me say, substantial issues. We're still dealing with optics.
And Ali, while we have you, can you tell us a little bit about what are the prospects, given that it doesn't seem like anything substantial has changed? What is it that these peace talks are about, given that it's clearly a case where the same conditions that were put by the Iranians even prior to the war still hold. Am I correct? For the most part, they're not asking for anything new. So what is it that's being asked? Is there a kind of a sense of what the Americans today are asking that is different from before, besides zero enrichment, which was rejected? And what are the sticking points?
No, actually, we are still dealing with the same issues: zero enrichment, handing of the highly enriched uranium, and of course, now we have this new issue that has risen during the war: the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. That actually wasn't there. The strait was open. So the war came, the strait closed, and now you need negotiations to open the strait. And the Iranians want sanctions relief. They want their assets to be unfrozen. Also, there are other issues such as Iran's regional role, ballistic missiles. So these are all issues on the table now. What's to be solved, what's to be not solved. There have been a lot of discussions with respect to a framework that would be put, and then both sides can negotiate over it for another 45 to 60 days. The issue is that there are some quite unbridgeable gaps. So for the Iranians, zero enrichment is a no-go. I mean, I don't know how this is going to be solved. This is a no-go. The handing of the highly enriched uranium to a foreign country, for the moment, it's a no-go. Giving up the ballistic missiles program is a no-go. Giving up on the regional allies. You know why? Because in this war, the uranium proved to be one of the elements of deterrence. The uranium, the highly enriched uranium, it's something that they felt is a kind of a chip on the table. Also, ballistic missiles program. It's in itself. It's what Iran has as a defensive shield. So are they going to give up their defensive shield for anything? And third thing, the regional allies. Well, it's clear that whenever they are warring together, let me say, they're fighting alongside each other, they're having more efficacy on the ground. And this is what this war proved. So if you can close a strait in Hormuz and close a strait in Bab el-Mandab and create more and more pressure on Israel, and put pressure also on the Mediterranean Sea, then Iran is capable of halting international business in a way or another. Let me say relatively, in three seas, in three areas. So why should they give up on their Hello.
Sorry, you were we got cut off, but that's okay because the Elsel Ahsan Halla. You said why should they give up on anything given that they could halt international business and so on?
Yeah, so why should, this war proved to the Iranians that all the elements that they are asked to give up are elements that emboldens their position. So why should they give up on them? And that's why this negotiations is bound to fail if it continues this way. I don't see that there's the possibility for a compromise to be reached, at least while Iran is still capable of fighting.
Ali, we have from the very beginning heard the American administration and Israel bank on a regime collapse or a regime change or mobilization from the Iranian populace on the the so-called Iranian street. Can you tell us a little bit about what things look like in Iran in terms of the the public's sort of mood or positions, and whether this has changed from before the war, the beginning of the war, and today. Like, if you can just tell us about these 3 points.
Well, Bassam, before the war, there's been a wave of protests in the country, and thousands of people were killed. The government said 3,000 something, 3,000, several hundreds were killed. And of course, the opposition was talking about much more numbers. That was a reflection of the polarization in the country, the division in the country. And there are actually, and still there is polarization. However, the war changed many things. First of all, the war diverted attention from a situation where Iranian opposition or Iranian with grievances are aiming at the government or the state or the establishment or the regime, whatever it's called, towards Iranians rallying around the flag and having the defense of the homeland as their priority. Yeah, of course, there are still people who even want the war to continue, who want the Americans and the Israelis to topple the system here. There are, but now I can say that there is a majority in the country that is rallying around the flag. They are with their country, regardless of the system, because they are seeing how the people were being killed. For 47 years, Bassam, the Iranian, the Islamic Republic has been trying to, to mobilize people around the idea of enmity and hostility towards the United States and Israel. This has been an ideological push for the past 47 years. And
vice versa.
No. But the fact is that in the past year, between June 2025 and 2026, ordinary Iranians, for the first time, organically experienced what does relation and feelings towards Israel and the United States be. So, I think many people started feeling this enmity and hostility organically without that ideological crust that used to cover relation or the feelings towards Israel and America. Israel and America were enemies on the television, on the buildings, with those huge posters in speeches of leaders. But this time, after the massacre of the students in Minab, after the killing of people, ordinary people in Tehran and Isfahan and Tabriz and Kermanshah and all the Iranian cities, after infrastructure was hit, after bridges were destroyed, I think the Iranians started feeling for the first time that yes, there is an enemy called Israel or an enemy called the United States. The Israel and the United States helped the system, the Islamic Republic, in proving their point.
Before I get to the Lebanon question, and that'll be my last question, before I get there, Ali, you have done remarkable research for many, many years on Iran and on various aspects, not just the politics, but also the religious aspects, the kinds of things that a lot of people actually don't get into and instead reduce to something simplistic and essentialist. There's talk about the distinction between the new leadership and the previous leadership here, at least in the United States. And we do know that a lot of the propaganda tries to create all sorts of mirages in order to propagate for continuing the war and going harder and so on. Is there a distinction between the leadership, regardless of the question of brutality of bombing and destruction of infrastructure and so on? In other words, even if the old leadership continued to exist, wouldn't that potential hardening, which is what is being discussed, have taken place anyway as a result of the brutal bombardment of Iran and infrastructure and so on? Or is there really a personality distinction on top of that?
Well, I think that the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei in February 2026, a couple of months ago, created a shift in approach, because there was a supreme leader whose approach was much cautious and always was reluctant to get into direct confrontation, and actually was probably more was leaning more towards containing crisis. And when you're 86, when you're 87, you're less tending to confront. You'd prefer to contain the situation and to get down the ladder as with less losses. Now, but between June 2025, when the war took place, when Israel started this war on Iran, and the assassination of Khamenei, I think things started changing in the persona of the Islamic Republic, because this state has been in a situation where it's been less revolutionary, less confrontational, less tending to get into battles and wars, and thinking that the more we can stay without warring, without fighting, the better is for our system. Actually, I think the system was traumatized by the killing of Soleimani in 2020, and the Americans, and America mainly, was capable of imposing deterrence on Iran. So the killing of Khamenei made this shift in the system. A new system came, and I mean, not a new regime, but a new leadership was there. It's true that Mustafa Khamenei is the son of Ali Khamenei, but I mean, my own argument, and actually I'm writing right now a piece on that, it's never like father, like son. We're dealing with two different personalities, with two different characters. Ali Khamenei was more, as I said, cautious, was more thinking of his legacy. I mean, at the same time, whenever he is to take a decision, he had a kind of a wide range of people that he wants to consult, and also the decision-making process goes through personalities and characters that some of them are quite different in their approach. But with Mustafa Khamenei, he came with his own very team, a team that's been around him for the past 15, 20 years. And this team immediately got into the decision-making circle. And now they can take the decisions smoothly without getting to face any opposition, real opposition, because there's no one that can oppose their own vision for the moment. And it's time of war, so they are capable of doing this. Yeah, there might be some different point of views here and there. There might be some warnings coming from the president. But given the fact that this new leadership is dealing with the situation right now as an existential threat, so yeah, I think there's more harmony, and there is a more solid position towards the whole situation. I don't know how much this will continue, but for the moment, I think that they succeeded in creating a consensus around Iran, not to get to talks as far as sanction blockade is imposed, and to stick by the Iranian red lines. This seems to be points of consensus within the Iranian system today.
Last question, Azizi, before we let you go. Now, can you tell us a little bit about the Lebanon front and its relationship to Iran's conditions? In the past days, we heard or we read Trump say enough is enough to the Israelis in terms of bombing Lebanon. That language is sort of unprecedented for the most part, as far as one can remember. The last time we heard something or saw something that is more definitive was in the early 1990s with Bush Senior, and that was costly and so on. The point is Iran, or the question is Iran holding the Lebanon front in the same manner that it holds its own? Because a lot of people were wondering whether Iran threw Lebanon under the bus, and many of us were saying, this is, first of all, premature, and second, it doesn't look like it, and third, of course, with the ceasefire in Lebanon, which is not complete, as Israel has violated it a couple of hundred times in the past few days. Is Iran holding the Lebanon front as part of the war, or is there a point or breaking point where these might separate from the perspective of the Iranian leadership?
Well, I think this was one war, several fronts, and that's how it was, and this is how it is. And the link, the bond between Hezbollah and Iran is quite strong. It's not an alliance. There is something organic, especially when it comes to the ideology, to the mentality, to even the goals and objectives. Now, this is going on not only on two fronts, but also on three fronts, because also when the Houthis participated in the war, so it became this way. And it was clear that when these three fronts are serving each other, we saw that when the Iranians were launching missiles towards the southern borders of Lebanon, or the northern borders of Israel, we felt it clearly that Hezbollah was operating much more easily, and that it had a lot of impact, especially when they were kind of synchronizing their attacks. Hezbollah, for example, launching missiles or drones, Iran launching missiles or drones at the same time. This synchronization, and let me just borrow from one of my friends this term, synchronization, because they were thinking at the same time and syncing their actions. This had a lot of impact. So, and I don't think that, as I told you before, that many things are on the table of negotiations table, but this war proved to Iran that its alliances, its ballistic missiles, all these elements are elements of power. Why should they give up on them? So for now, I think this is the situation. I mean, for Lebanon, this war isn't just a war that is going to end this way. We don't know how it's going to end. We don't know the price that's. I mean, I'm one of those whose village is now completely occupied, and I'm not sure when I'll be back. Actually, we had this discussion today, me and my wife. So she was telling me, so are we going to get back to the village? I said, well, I don't know. Well, I mean, we have to watch and see what's going to happen. But this is just a huge war. It's a big war, and I don't think this war is going to finish this way. This was going to be. We were going to see more phases. This is just a ceasefire right now. There might be more phases. God knows how this is going to end. Who's going to win and who's going to lose? Well, at the end,
I am
just watching.
I am so sorry, Ali, about your personal situation. I really appreciate the time you gave us. I know that you're in the eye of the storm. We will leave it at that, and we hope to speak with you whenever it's convenient. And be safe. All power to you. Everyone actually here at Jadaliya and ASI appreciate your joining us.
Thank you very much, Bassam. Thank you very much.
Salam.
Bye bye. Thank you. يلا.
حبيبي. Salam.
باي.
So I'd like to follow up on the point you just raised of kind of journalism kowtowing to power. But here we have an additional dimension, which is that, of course, the media needs to cover the U.S. leader because of, not only is he a very powerful individual, but he's the one who started this war, and he has a power to stop it. Nevertheless, so many commentators are treating him as someone who can be taken seriously, as someone whose words actually have meaning, as someone who can be analyzed as a rational policymaker. Whereas the more he opens his mouth, you get the feeling what they really should be doing is questioning his sanity and looking at the policy implications of his cognitive decline, or whatever you want to call it. Have you seen sufficient attention being paid to what is very clearly a Mad King syndrome?
I think that's a great question. And I would even broaden it to just the general way that, especially in the case of Iran, as someone who has followed, I'm of Iranian heritage myself. So I've always sort of lived in this fear of the US is going to go to war with Iran. This is a fear that a lot of people in the diaspora grew up with. And part of that has been living with this constant framing, whether it's popular culture or media culture or the news, that Iran is this fanatic, irrational actor. And it's not unique to Iran. That's sort of the way that the region is treated as a whole. I mean, it's Orientalism 101. But we're dealing with, and you see that direct language from, say, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who says we're dealing with religious fanatics. These people are crazy. I think did he call them nut jobs at one point?
I think the Iranian leadership is the pinnacle of crazy in an insane region.
Exactly. And so that's why I'm saying I think the Iranian case is especially, you can see this caricature sort of play out. And that's always juxtaposed with the assumption that on our side, whether it's the US, whether it's our allies, whether it's Israel, you have rational, civilized actors that, we're going about things in a moral, rational way, and they're always irrational and amoral. And what's interesting to have watched this played out is how erratic, I mean, in a way, this administration and this president is the most obvious example of erratic behavior or of behavior that, I mean, he's so unpredictable. He contradicts himself within not a day, but within an interview, within minutes. And yet, and this, I think you could go back to the Biden admin. I mean, there was a lot of questions about his cognitive abilities, and yet it wasn't really questioned. I mean, he was carrying out a genocide, and yet his ability to lead the country and make these decisions was never really questioned. It was always on the outskirts, and it was commentators that were raising the questions rather than journalists. So I think you're raising a really good point. Again, I think it draws out a bigger question. What is the role of journalism? What is the role of the journalist if it's not to challenge these very things? Because the consequences are not just life and death in the case of Iran or Lebanon or Gaza, where you have these mass atrocities that are being committed, but it's also the consequences that it has for US soft power, whether the US can be, I mean, I would argue that the US can't be a trusted partner, ally, or diplomat with what we've seen, but it has consequences throughout the world. We've seen that not only in this current administration, but one of the arguments that was made during the Gaza genocide when a different administration, when Biden was in power, was the consequences were going to be far-reaching of allowing Israel to act with total impunity and watching every single norm shattered in real time.
And following on that, it was my clear impression during the Gaza genocide up until today that Western journalists and US journalists in particular had more freedom to criticize their own government than they had freedom to criticize the Israeli government. And I'm curious, now that we're talking about a US war, a war in which the US is directly involved, if you agree with my previous characterization, does it also apply now that US journalists still have more freedom to criticize the US government and its role in this war than the Israeli government and its actions in this war?
I think that's certainly true. I still don't see any real, not even criticism, but engagement with the Israeli government. And the reason why it's important is because it's US tax dollars and weapons that are allowing that state to continue its war crimes throughout the region. Like, that point cannot be emphasized enough, because you get this kind of whataboutism from people who will say things like, well, why aren't we talking about country X, or why aren't we talking about this country?
Nigeria.
Like, why aren't we talking about this? Well, because we are not providing billions of dollars every year. We are not giving them our latest weapons. We are not giving them diplomatic cover. So it's this very obvious thing where when you are basically, committing these crimes together.
Yeah.
Then,
So Americans, you're saying, don't bear the same level of responsibility for the genocide against white Afrikaners in South Africa.
No, I would say it's not the same kind of contribution as to what we're doing specifically in Gaza and in the region as a whole. The other thing I would say is, what you see is a media that tends to fall in line with its own administration as well. So while there is criticism of the US government, I'm not saying there's no criticism, there is. But wartime, because you said specifically because the US is actually directly involved in this. During wartime, there tends to be, again, this just echoing of whatever is the official narrative of the state. And the best example of that, of course, is the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And we're not seeing something very different. The only difference is this administration didn't even try to manufacture consent. They just started a war. They didn't try to really justify it in the way where we had the buildup to the invasion of Iraq in 2003. So there was a lot more work that the journalists could have done in 2003, because they had ample time to debunk all of the lies that the Bush administration was telling at the time. But even right now, you're still not seeing the kind of critical journalism you would hope to see, especially given the potential fallout of this conflict and this war.
Assal, before we let you go, we have a few more minutes. I want to ask you a parting question, and that is about comparing the coverage of the genocide in Gaza and what's happening today. If you can, of course, there are a lot of similarities, but to what extent can we talk about the coverage of the genocide in Gaza as having set the table for more lunatic level coverage, like even more without even preparation? In other words, as you said, in the Al Shifa hospital debacle, there was much to do about how this took place. Whereas with the schoolgirls bombing, of course, there was a rejection, but it seemed like things were paved, the way was paved to these, fantastical sort of type of coverage. And your coverage of the genocide was phenomenal. So how do you see that trajectory, or is there one?
Absolutely. And I think it's not just the coverage. I think and this is why, what was happening in Gaza, and what is still happening in Gaza, a genocide is something that everybody should be against no matter what. Not because it affects them personally, but because, especially if you are in the Western world and you are, your government is contributing to what is happening, then I think on a moral level, obviously we should be against it. But another argument for what was problematic about what we were seeing, beyond just the gross inhumanity of what was happening to Palestinians and continues to happen to Palestinians, is the fact that it was destroying not a system that worked very well. And I think it's always important to say this. It's not to say that the international system was some utopic concept that was actually being applied equally across the board. That was never the case. But there was at least a concept of it, right? There was the veneer, there was the facade, there was something we felt like we could work with, something you could call to. And we watched that be destroyed in real time. So in a way, Gaza paved the way for everything. It will be, in my opinion, a watershed moment historically for this century, to look at how things shifted from the way that atrocities are covered in the media, from the way that they're carried out by states, just the complete disintegration of even the facade of an international system. And so in that way, I absolutely think it paved the way for these sort of, watered down types of coverage and headlines that now make it seem like, targeting a journalist or journalists being killed or medics being killed, hospitals being attacked, schools being attacked, oil fields being attacked, anything that is related to civilian infrastructure. I mean, scenes that when you see the actual footage look apocalyptic have just been normalized as this is part of, everyday, this is a normal war. And if you compare it to how there was coverage during the early stages of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, you can see the difference. I mean, Russia was basically framed as a war criminal, as committing war crimes, as a sort of monstrous actor, and you don't see that in the case of Israel or now the United States.
We would love to see you again, Assal, and we're always following you, us and tens of thousands of people on X. Keep up what you're doing. A lot of your material, just so you know, and I learned this from some of the material that we actually did on Media Wars in the last couple of weeks. Some of your material was picked up from our Media Wars show, and was featured in classrooms, including your already existing platform. So just so you know, people are looking at what you're doing as a lesson or as a way of demonstrating the duplicity that's taking place, the double standards. You've compared Ukraine to Gaza, and then Ukraine to Iran, and you've done a remarkable job at making us see very explicitly what is going on. So thank you so much for all that you do, and
Yes.
all power to you.
Yes,
Thank you.
and for your exceptionally valuable contributions.
Thank you. That is all very, very generous. I think ultimately the point is not to tell the story in a different way, not to create a different kind of framing, just tell the truth. That's it. That's all anybody is asking for. And I think that's the thing to always clarify. And if you tell the truth, people can decide on their own, which action is permissible and which action is an atrocity. And they have been doing that, but they've been doing it not because of the coverage, but in spite of it. And that's because of the work of journalists, local journalists on the ground, whether they're especially in the case of Palestine, but also in the case of Lebanon, also independent journalists, these types of forums. This is how we're able to counter a narrative that has been mainstream for a very, very long time. So I appreciate having this space and having these discussions.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
I
you.
just have to say that, when New York Times can tell the truth on Palestine and Iran, it's a sign of Armageddon. It's the end of times. So we will see. Shukran. Thanks again, Assal, and thanks, Mouin. We are now going to head to our next guests, and we will let you go about your day, Assal. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Salam.
Bye. I don't know if you're still recording, so I didn't want to just drop off.
No, we're good. We're good. I mean, all this is going to be edited, I think. Last week I left something that said all this will be edited. It went into the final. All right, Assal.
Everybody does it. It's not everyone knows that there's editing that happens afterwards, so it's not a big deal.
Good afternoon, Nahid. How are you?
Good. How are you, Bassam? Good to see you.
Hello, Nahid. Very nice for you to join us.
Hi, Mouin. Very good to see you.
Nahid, well, let me just say very quickly, Nahid is an assistant professor at UT Austin in Media and Middle East Studies. We are delighted that you're joining us. We have a brief few minutes with you, and we'd love to ask you to share with us your broad take and focus on whatever you deem fit on the question of the manner in which the media has handled the war on Iran, both from the U.S. perspective and from the Iranian perspective.
Sure. So, it's been a It's been a long time for Iranians to be without the internet. So definitely since February 28th, but sporadically before that. So this has been a historic internet shutdown for Iranians, which means that we're not really hearing a lot from Iranians inside Iran. So the voices that are loudest are either voices in the diaspora through these expatriate TV channels or social media sites, or every now and then also the voices of pro-regime advocates or supporters, because they do have a special sort of white internet access. It's called a white card to the internet, which gives them better access to the internet than your regular Iranian. And so this space has been completely fragmented and fraught. And I think when in the West we talk about Iranians and their support for this or that, for the most part, what we're talking about is really Iranian diaspora voices and neglecting the voices of those in Iran. There's just been very little trickling out. So that to me has been very interesting. And the expatriate channels, of course, have followed a very well-funded political campaign or political agenda. This information is all out there, and yet we still keep referring to Iran International, the most widely watched Iranian Persian language TV channel, as a news channel. It is not a news channel. It is a complete sort of PR channel. It was for a long time for Reza Pahlavi. Now, with the way the war has gone, they are, taking on pro-Israeli and pro-US positions, have sort of toned it down a little bit on Pahlavi. But both Iran International and other channels, but certainly in the case of Iran International, it's been very obvious that the funding came about $250,000 from the Saudis, that there's a coordinated media architecture or campaign between Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the US CENTCOM in the region to push certain narratives for regime change. And this has been going on for years, both through these TV channels as well as on social media. For example, Israel has had very sort of organized and coordinated influence campaigns on social media to drive certain narratives. And it has been interesting to watch this, because it's sort of these narratives were trickling through gradually, and then all of a sudden they had flipped the script so that you could only speak about Iran a certain way. You could no longer speak about reforms in Iran. You could no longer speak about regular gradual political change or any kind of political process in Iran. These sort of channels and media campaigns had certain sort of narratives, rhetorical strands that became very prominent. One of those was that the Islamic Republic is an occupying sort of Arab Islamic force that needs to be uprooted. It's an occupying power. It is not native to Iran. Another was that Iranians have been trying to uproot their government for 47 years, which is totally nonsensical, right? Because Iranians fought to have that government, not that particular government, but for their revolution. And even until, I would say, as far as 2022, they were trying to really bring about changes and change their system of governance from within. With Women, Life, Freedom in 2022, I would say, that sort of the reforms were dead. People were asking for regime change completely, but it certainly hasn't been 47 years since Iranians have been occupied by a foreign sort of force that they need to uproot. But these have taken hold within Iranian discourses, certainly among those in the diaspora, but also among those in Iran. We've had an internet shutdown for 2 months. But prior to that, we did have, communication with Iranians inside Iran, with friends, family, colleagues, and so on. And the truth is that the people who most watch these expatriate channels are, in fact, Iranians in Iran. They're not Iranians in the diaspora. So Iran International, Manoto Channel, BBC Persian, all of these channels, and there have been surveys, the Gammon survey out of Holland, which is a very credible survey, which have shown that International is the most widely watched channel. Then it's Manoto, then it's, I think, Gem TV, and then it's BBC Persian, I believe, and then it's Iran State Television. What this tells us is that these narratives that have been driven by this coordinated regime change campaign, coordinated between the countries that I mentioned, has really fully taken root among Iranians in Iran as well, so that when we speak to our loved ones in Iran, we hear some of these rhetorical strands back from them, as if they had not lived in, the Islamic Republic in post-revolutionary Iran themselves, and hadn't personally experienced all those years of political activism, uprising after uprising, the Green Movement, the protests of 2018, 2019, and then the Women Life Freedom Campaign, which was an incredibly widespread uprising that had universalist, progressive values, intersectional values that really sort of upheld the rights of the minorities, women, and so on. Point being, Iran has been this political field of extreme sort of political organization and activism. And yet, within a few years, this coordinated media campaign has managed to entrench certain ideas of the history of the last decades and the standing of the Islamic Republic. And I think, this has been interesting to watch because for me, especially in the diaspora, to see some very smart people in the West, even though they have experienced and witnessed what the U.S., what kind of, cemetery disaster the U.S. has turned the Middle East into, the disaster upon disaster that the U.S. has brought the Middle East. Having watched that from this space, and having also seen what this government has done to the U.S. itself and to the democratic processes internally and the corruption and all of that, some very smart voices to believe that they had to sort of speak for foreign intervention in Iran under the sort of understanding that doing that means supporting the Iranian people. So the reason that is a mistake is because, for Iranians in Iran who have also, some of them, we don't have any numbers, there are no credible surveys on this, but some of them, we did hear this from some friends and family in Iran, also asked for foreign intervention. It was a different situation. They were not situated outside and witnessed what had happened. They had also been force-fed this media and diet, for many years, but also they had seen what had happened on their streets in uprisings. They were the ones who had given blood. They're the ones who had seen their, nieces and nephews and daughters and sons get killed in uprisings. And so I think we kind of have to separate the diaspora, who from the comfort of their homes have been calling for war on their own homeland, and for this thing that we've also seen in Iran of Iranians out of what's been called estisal in conversations in Iran, and debates that we see coming out of between sociologists and so on in Iran, this sort of notion of having no options, of having reached a point where it no longer matters, where you, so to speak, sort of vacate your subjectivity, where you just say, I no longer speak from a place of agency. Let everything just be destroyed and let's start from scratch. That's something that we've also seen sort of those demands coming from inside Iran after many years of trying to change their fortunes and failing, year after year, decade after decade. That's a position that certain Iranians have taken. But again, that's a different position than sitting here in the diaspora and calling for an intervention. I guess another thing that I do want to mention is, in the vacuum of voices coming from Iran, because of this internet shutdown and also because of the risk associated with speaking from Iran, although I will say that the debate is wider and more nuanced and richer and freer than what we might often assume from the West. So, for example, on this debate show Panorama and others that are sort of internet talk shows that are not subject to strict state media control, we have seen quite sort of open debates on these subjects. And still, in the vacuum of voices coming from Iran, we've seen in the West all kinds of personalities take position and represent Iranian people that have no background, no experience, no substance, such as, the actor from Shahs of Sunset, or other social media influencers, most of whom happen to be attractive women who are sort of fluent English speakers, whose only claim to represent Iranians or credibility is literally their Iranian heritage and not much else. And so we've seen sort of this vacuum be filled by people who do not have the historical knowledge, who don't have the, who haven't studied Iran for many years, who simply take up these positions, propagating war and, going on these media circuits, whether it's television or social media. And I'll kind of stop there and see if you guys have any questions, but, another important phenomenon that I've observed is how both sides, the pro-Israeli side, the pro-war and intervention side, as well as the pro-Islamic Republic side, have by now really learned how to. The pro-Israel and pro-US have always known this. They've done this in war after war, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, elsewhere. But how the Islamic Republic has now also taken on this practice of pink washing, right? Of basically claiming that what's happening, who represents them and who they're supporting are women. Israel really co-opted the Women Life Freedom uprising, by saying that, that uprising showed that Iranians and Israelis are basically completely allied and they're seeking the same political goals. There was even an Iran International reporter who went into one of these ruins of, in the course of the Gaza genocide and wrote Woman Life Freedom on one of these walls, as if Woman Life Freedom had anything to do with the annihilation of women and children, which is what happened in Gaza. And so, kind of tried to co-opt this notion of woman life freedom for their political purposes. We've seen this with these, US foreign intervention projects, but now also the Islamic Republic in the last few weeks, they've opened this, they've done this in previous pro-regime demonstrations as well, but it's never been this visible with pink tanks rolling down the streets, women of all sorts who are there in military garb supporting the Islamic Republic. So each side is they understand the power of women in Iran, that they have been at the forefront of bringing about political change of these uprisings. And each side is trying to claim the voice and the power of Iranian women, while Iranian women themselves, especially those who agitated and advocated for the Woman Life Freedom uprising, are being silenced by both sides, right? Both the Pahlavists and the pro-Israeli side, they shut down any women who showed up with Women Life Freedom flags to Pahlavi demonstrations and protests. And the Islamic Republic, of course, repressed Women Life Freedom and its advocates as Israeli aligned political activists. There's just one last point I want to make. And I know I said this was going to be my last one, but one last point I want to make, which is that, unfortunately, we're dealing also with all of this happening in the age of AI, and Israelis, as we know, are expert, probably the leading nation as far as internet security and AI is concerned. And so, we've seen these deep fakes representing Iranian victims and many of these sort of disinformation campaigns, some of which have been very impactful. Of course, the pro-Islamic Republic agencies and bodies have also created other memes and whatnot, and some of them much more successfully than anything the Israelis have done, to be frank. With the Lego movies, I feel like those have really created a global support almost for the stance of the Islamic Republic.
Thank you so much, Nahid, and we actually have a lot to ask about as we share with everyone. But I know we want to keep your time because you do have limited time. But we would love to speak with you more extensively next time, and perhaps we can have a separate conversation and based on your experience as someone who has relayed and portrayed matters even way before this war, your books and scholarship, as well as some topics that I've seen circulating about how Persian speakers are gravitating towards Clubhouse in order to avoid the bots. You can say a word about this. I just want to say that we also are joined by Jehad Abusalim, whom I'll introduce in just a minute. Ahlan wa sahlan, Jihad. If you want to say a word about the so gravitation to a Clubhouse, feel free before we release you.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think Clubhouse has been basically the only somewhat sane space, and it's because, on social media where all kinds of bots or inauthentic users can shut down certain conversations or heavily drive the conversation a certain direction, because it's all textual, right? This cannot happen on Clubhouse, because Clubhouse, for those people who might not be familiar with it, you actually have to unmute your mic and speak. So it's basically an audio Zoom type of town hall where thousands of people can gather. It's usually led by somebody with a certain theme, and then people have these conversations. And on Clubhouse, because it's also an audio format, you've seen a lot of participation actually. So maybe this is a little bit of a corrective to what I said before, because those are the conversations through which I understand what's happening on the ground in Iran. The Clubhouse has been the only space that has, to some extent, filled that vacuum, of voices from Iran. However, of course, you have to speak Persian, so Clubhouse conversations don't really make it into English language or other language media spaces. So they rarely have any kind of impact on those spaces. But it's been an important space for Iranians who pro-war, anti-war. I've heard shouting matches on Clubhouse, people defending, for example, the Iranians who came to infrastructure such as bridges so that they wouldn't be bombed, having a shouting match with somebody else, saying anybody who brings their kid to save a bridge is mental and should go into a mental institution, and this and that. But that's really where that conversation is happening right now. It has also been happening for years on Clubhouse. There are, of course, certain spaces that will be a certain sort of, there's super pro-Pahlavi Clubhouse spaces or rooms that you can't enter with a more sort of different opinion or measured or balanced view. But many of them have been quite open, and we've had people calling in from Iran who were returning from the Caspian, from their seaside houses, or villages elsewhere after the ceasefire, on the road, describing what they were seeing on the way. And because of this vacuum of information and the lack of images, we just don't really understand the degree of destruction in Iran. We also don't understand the degree of destruction in the Arab Gulf countries, right? There's been such a sort of tight information and media war on all fronts in terms of controlling images. But it's been there that I've learned most, I guess, about what people are thinking and how they're thinking it, aside from personal relations. But I just want to drive home as a last thing, and then I'll stop talking, how difficult it has been to communicate even with loved ones in Iran, because to get an internet card, to get a config, as it's called, sort of a configuration to bypass the internet shutdown, is very expensive. It's a very wobbly sort of technology, doesn't always work. To be able to make phone calls abroad is very expensive. Once again, at least somehow calling the US is much cheaper than calling Europe. So luckily I'm in the US, and I'm able to have longer conversations with people I know in Iran. But I think we just need to consider how little information, even people with family and friends there, how little connectivity there is with people inside of Iran, and really getting their perspective.
Thank you so much, Nahid. And we are now also joined by Mona
Thank you very
Karim.
much, Nahid.
Both Mona
Of
and Jihad,
course.
I'll introduce you in a second. Nahid, will speak with you soon, and all power to you. I hope we could continue to connect in the near future, and hopefully under
Thank you
better
so much.
circumstances.
Thank you so much for having this program. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank
Great to
you.
speak with you. Take care. Shukran.
Salam.
Bye. Bye.
Hello, Jihad and Mona.
Hi
Hello.
everyone.
Marhaba.
Ahlan wa sahlan. Sorry for
أهلا
keeping
أهلا
you,
بالسامعين.
Jihad. I know you called earlier. But Jihad and Muna, we are now going to move from actually, for the most part, we were talking about Iran, to the topics you'd like to address. But let me quickly introduce you so we can get this out of the way.
Are we recording already?
No,
Okay.
we're not going to record today. And of course, we're recording. شو عم نعمل لك يعني؟
Oh, I thought you stopped the recording.
لا. ما في وقت.
Okay.
Jehad is executive director of the Gaza Genocide Center and co-editor of Light in Gaza, Writings Born of Fire. And Mona Karim is a poet, translator, and literary scholar based in St. Louis. I will give the floor to Mouin, and ahlan wa sahlan to both of you. Thanks for joining us on short notice.
Thank you.
Yes, very warm
having-
welcome to both of you. Jihad, if I could start with you, and as you know very well, we've heard increasingly less about Gaza and the ongoing Gaza genocide in the 6 or so weeks since the war against Iran erupted. What is it about Gaza that we should know that we're not being made aware of? And what role specifically has the media not been playing that it could and should have been playing during this period?
Thank you so much for having me, Mouin and Bassam, and greetings to Mona and to the listeners. Well, Gaza has been experiencing a genocide, and currently it is experiencing what I would call a genocide under a ceasefire banner, as is the case with all the ceasefires, all the ceasefire agreements that have Israel as a signatory on them as a side. The shooting and the firing did not fully stop. The starvation did not stop. The displacement did not stop. Over 730 Palestinians have been killed since October 2025. This is when
That's more than 3 a day.
Yeah, that's at least 2 children a day. And we still have 94% of hospitals destroyed or damaged. And in December, Israel deregistered 37 humanitarian organizations and has blocked MSF supplies entirely since January.
Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah. And when the Iran war began on February 28th, Israel closed every border crossing, including Rafah, cutting off medical evacuations. So the word ceasefire implies something has ceased. What has ceased is the world's attention, not the killing. And in terms of the media coverage, well, again, as I mentioned, and based on the indicators on the ground, and what I said does not capture a glimpse of what's happening, the absence of coverage does not mean improvement. As I mentioned, the genocide is ongoing, regardless of whether cameras are pointed at it or not. And people in Gaza are going to bed hungry. When it rains, their tents flood. There are people who, aside from the 730 who were killed as a result of airstrikes and shelling and so on, there are people who are dying of preventable diseases, right? So the structural impact of the genocide continues. The reality on the ground does not change because the media's attention is focused elsewhere. What changes is the flow of coverage and the scale of that coverage, and that means that and I'll talk about this later, but we have an obligation to refuse this forced amnesia.
Speaking of forced amnesia, a previous guest speaking with us today suggested that one of the benefits of the war on Iran, from Israel's perspective, is that it has pushed Gaza off away from the media spotlight, and that this can even be seen as one of Israel's objectives. Have you seen something similar?
I mean, Israel does not want to arrive at a resolution in Gaza that would benefit the Palestinians. It views the current ceasefire from a tactical point of view that would allow it to put Gaza on hold until it figures out its other business elsewhere. But that, of course, means more pain and immiseration for the people on the ground. And people on the ground feel that at any point, I mean, we're approaching potentially, or what is supposedly scheduled Israeli elections in October 2026. Between now and then, it's really hard to predict what Netanyahu is going to do if it looks like he is not going to be able to stay in power. And if for whatever reason he cannot resume attacking Iran, or he cannot resume attacking Lebanon, and or open new fronts across the region, Gaza and the West Bank end up two places where more spectacular violence, more bloodshed, more destruction could be things that he might deploy in order to maintain this his standing as a wartime prime minister, in order to mobilize the forces that keep his coalition intact, and in order to ensure that the Israeli public, continues rallying around him. So there are these possibilities, but ultimately, when Israel unleashed this genocide against Gaza, the goal of genocide, that is the destruction of an entire people and the dismantlement of the foundations of the society in where they live, in which they inhabit, is to basically continue achieving that. Now, we're grateful that we're not seeing the death of more than 100 persons a day, which was kind of the rate, the daily rate of killing as we approach the October 2025 ceasefire. But there is no the Board of Peace and all of these political framework that have been established. They do not guarantee this, minimum restraining of Israel in terms of continuing its aggression or honoring any commitments that it has vis-a-vis even the ceasefire agreements and the early phases of those agreements, to allow aid, to allow the medical evacuation of patients. As I mentioned, people are dying of preventable diseases, to allow, like basic equipment, basic caravans for people so that they don't live in these tents where children are being stung by rodents and bit by rats. So it seems to me that, yes, I mean, it's a matter of scale. The scale now of what is happening in Gaza is not as intense, but it is horrific. And this is what Israel wants to do. It just wants to keep Gaza without any resolution, with the possibility of resuming the large-scale attacks on it in order to finish what it started earlier. Now, the question of whether Israel is capable of that's a different question. But here, I'm talking about the intent and the mindset and what's happening, what the leaders of Israel want to see.
Thank you, Jihad. Let me bring in Mona. Mona, we are very delighted to have you here. I think maybe it's been either a long time or at least in the past couple of years, it's the first time we have had you with us. So, ahlan wa sahlan. Mona, I just wanted to ask you to share with us the lay of the land, the context, the broad context of the GCC from the perspective of course, the war in Iran, but also with some, based on your expertise and knowledge, with some historical background as to how we should see what is happening from the perspective of the GCC, whether it's this or that country or all involved.
Yes, this war has been like ushering a new world every day. Every day we have a new reading, and it's been um, nothing is easy to speculate on. However, we can all agree that it's a whole new world for the Gulf region, in every sense of the word. So if we step back a little bit, maybe like how much the Gulf states have been invested in so-called diplomacy, where they can buy the alliances of everyone from the United States to smaller actors to, different allies. And this war proved that, that kind of diplomacy doesn't really translate onto the ground, right? You are exposed. The U.S. Army bases are turned out to be more of let's say like puppets rather than something with substance and material defense. And they're really shaken by all of this. The Gulf states are, and they're shaken in different ways, because the first thing we can see in the past 3 days is that economically they are so vulnerable. The United Arab Emirates asked for a currency swap with the US. Trump said they're contemplating this. A country like Kuwait has 95% of its economy dependent on oil. Saudi Arabia is saying that they will not get involved in regional wars anymore. Specifically, they were interested in going into Sudan, supporting the Sudanese army against the rapid forces. So I'm saying this in the sense that there's so much happening geopolitically about the roles that, the Gulf states have, especially, let's say Saudi Arabia, Emirates, to some extent, Qatar, is this idea of how much can we play in the larger region, advance our agenda. This has become, this is now really hard to maintain. On another level, you can imagine how vulnerable the domestic situation is. You maybe saw like the past 2 years or so, Kuwait has been revoking citizenship in a very systematic yet I don't know, unpredictable manner, right? They started with like those, like for example, wives of Kuwaitis who are naturalized. Then they also put in some names of people who are politically involved, and this campaign has resulted into denaturalizing at least 15% of the citizen population. um, I don't know, like I think this is maybe a campaign unprecedented, not only for the region but really even globally, like at least since the Second World War, basically, right? Now Bahrain is following up in the same direction when it comes to manipulating, weaponizing citizenship. And then on the other levels, that like there is already criticism on the ground about like how much the local populations are having to pay for this alliance with the United States. So when we think about the Gulf in this moment, we have to think about, again, geopolitically, economically, but also domestically. What does this mean? After all that repression of domestic movements, as well as regional movements, revolutions, and so on. It can be a breath of fresh air, to see like all this interventionism being limited and even subverted.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to follow up. You had mentioned that Kuwait has now, I think, for the past year or so, been revoking large numbers of citizenships, and that now several other Gulf countries are following suit. And now, in the context of the war on Iran, we are also seeing a growing number of not just journalists, but also people trying to relay information, even if only to let their loved ones know that they're safe, being put in prison. We have, I think, most famously the case of Ahmad Shihabuddin in Kuwait who was arrested, I believe, 5 or 6 weeks ago, and hasn't been heard from since. And in his case, fortunately, an international campaign has been launched demanding his release. What can you tell us about his case, and also about others in which the net appears to be catching not only journalists, but anyone who is circulating information that is deemed unwanted by the authorities?
Yes. Well, you know, it's always really interesting to see how citizenship functions in the Gulf region. I am myself stateless from Kuwait, and it's interesting to see that now there's a whole population of stateless. What does stateless mean anymore, right? How does it function with all these like new tensions? I say this because we are seeing the definition of who's citizen and who has rights becoming even more and more narrow, right? So, for example, uh, I mentioned like the wives of Kuwaiti men who were naturalized, political descendants of different from different political movements being losing their citizenship. And then we go a step further where now the entire Shia population of Kuwait has become a target again, which is very much what happened also in the 1980s in the context of the Iraq-Iran war. We are hearing that almost 1,000 people have been arrested in Kuwait since the war. You have charges such as terrorism, spreading fake news, in the case of Ahmed Shabdin, it was something as simple as sharing a video that was already circulating, right? So, like, and
All
I
right,
say
so
this
it was,
because,
just to interrupt you, it was not an original video that he recorded.
yes, it was not. Yeah, absolutely. And this just tells you of like, yeah, just like the scale of arbitrary oppression of like the issue is not just what you share, what you say, what you think. It's also your character. The fact that you are a visible figure that represent a sort of opposition to the state. Even though someone like Ahmed, he is much more associated with. Let's say, being a Palestinian American and reporting from the West. He rarely reported actually on Kuwait, right? And I want to also bring in a thread that may not be as visible, but because he's a third generation Palestinian, there's also like this, like, let's say, or like a discourse that's not very dominant, which is, well, what is, this guy is not Kuwaiti, and why is he here, and why is he reporting this, and so on, and so of course you never know who is pushing this discourse. We know so much PR, campaigning, fake accounts are. It's really hard. It's basically always muddying the reality for us, but what I can tell you is that, yeah, like there's hundreds of people being arrested. There's all these fake videos, or not fake videos, staged videos of like, we went into a house, there was flags of Hezbollah and pictures of Khomeini and so on, and this is a terrorist cell. It looks like more of a souvenir shop rather than a cell. And we saw this several times in Kuwait and in the Emirates as well. There's no transparency. They post the pictures of those they arrest, but of course, there's no fair process. There's something close to even like a military kind of court, everything being done in secrecy and sped up. But also, I want to mention, for example, two women political prisoners. One is Fari al-Saqaf, and the other one is Suad Lemnayes. These are women who are from, let's say, Kuwaiti bourgeois families, but from a generation of, let's say, Arab nationalism, and all they did is like post about like, yeah, U.S. army bases are a danger to our country, to our region. We need to re-question this. These women have been in jail for like almost 6 weeks. We don't know anything about them. People are too scared to say something about them. And I mentioned their class background because, again, the more you know that like those who have privilege are being targeted, it just tells you how the status quo has gotten much worse, and just how much like the state is also in panic, right? Of like, how do you manage dissent now? How do you manage the fact that you don't know where your oil economy will go this moment on, and so on.
سوري علق. منى انتوا شو بتقولوا علق؟
علق.
علق. وجهاد
علق.
علق. Okay, شفت؟ Arab nationalism is a true phenomenon.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. عن جد علق. I was like pressing and nothing was happening. Jihad, if you don't mind, you and I spoke briefly about this, and it's really fascinating what you are doing right now, and you keep doing these really wonderful things and expanding our horizons. Can you tell us a little bit about the Gaza Genocide Center and its mission in terms of awareness, and why is it that what is it, and why did you start it? Given like what this program is about, how does it relate to the question of portrayal and what people know or do not know, and why you need to do this? So if you can talk a little bit about this, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Gaza Genocide Center, which will be launched in November of this year, inshallah, it's a documentation and memorial institution. We're a team of people who come from the world of tech, academia, advocacy, human rights work. And together we're building a permanent, structured record of what's happening in Gaza and what has happened in Gaza, including the incidents, the patterns, the statements of intent. And we are going to pair all of that with a memorial archive that preserves the lives and stories of people who were killed and those who survived. And the third piece of the Gaza Genocide Center is an educational hub that will connect the present with the past, with the history and the context of what's been happening in Gaza. And one of the reasons an institution like this is necessary has to do with mainstream media coverage. However extensive at moments of peak attention, this coverage, tends to be episodic. So it follows the news cycle. It captures individual incidents, but rarely documents or captures the system behind these incidents, the policies, the patterns, the evolution of intent over time. And then when attention moves on, the record fragments. We're now living in a reality where tech platforms delete content, links rot, accounts get suspended, and as your guest said earlier, the problem and challenge of AI, we're surrounded by a lot of AI slop. Some of the most important documentation of what's happening in Gaza has disappeared from Instagram simply because Instagram deemed one journalist or activist on the ground problematic, and then we lose like hundreds of videos that this person recorded. Also, content is disappearing from YouTube and other platforms, and of course, this happens without explanation or appeal. And also, as we enter this era of tech tyranny, it becomes harder to control and to defend ourselves against this top-down manipulation that's going to happen as we experience that. So the Gaza Genocide Center exists to fill that gap. It's not a media organization. We're not replacing the work of the media, but we're building what journalism, what the media, by its nature, cannot provide currently, which is a durable, structured, and verifiable archive that does not depend on the news cycle to stay alive. And we want it to be a record that researchers, advocates, educators, and future generations can actually use to remember the history, to seek justice, and to, just ensure that the lessons of the genocide in Gaza are not repeated, universally speaking. So it's not an easy mission, but we're in the building phase now, and hopefully by November we will have something to share with you. So stay tuned.
Well, it
Akid,
sounds like
Akid.
it sounds like a very important and valuable initiative. And just I was listening to you speaking about content being deleted from YouTube and so on, and I'm sure many people in the West when they were listening to Mona speak will have said, "Oh, these horrible things only happen over there." But I think, as you just pointed out, it's a global phenomenon, and certainly if you look at the way, for example, that Elon Musk has been silencing people left and right on Twitter. It's to say nothing about the broader issues with the media that this podcast is designed to address. It's very much a global phenomenon, which is as at home in the West as anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we are aware. We've all read the Palantir Manifesto, so we all know what's coming. We're aware that unlike for me personally, when I joined Facebook in 2008, it was for me it was like a new kind of environment of free expression, albeit probably like the earlier iterations of the internet forums were kind of freer, but people were expressing themselves. Those tools were utilized in mobilization during the early moments of the Arab uprisings and so on. But now, as I mentioned, this is turning into a tyranny, and there will be a lot of manipulation, and there will be a lot of many orchestrated efforts to manipulate, to erase, and to reshape the narratives around key and major events moving forward. So it's an act of emphasizing our sovereignty and as people who also produce knowledge and have a message and also are preserving their history online. There, of course, we can't match this world, but we have to try.
I don't know what to say. I always don't know what to say when we are supposed to close, and we've asked you to, join us for a brief period. And the reason I don't know what to say is because I would love to continue the conversation, but I must keep to what we suggested, even with a bit of a delay. Mona and Jihad, I mean, you both are, colleagues, friends, and remarkable, and researchers and scholars. Um, is there anything that you'd like to close with that goes even beyond the scope of this conversation, that addresses the moment? You don't have to, but if there something that you'd like to share in closing before we let you go, whatever comes to mind, because this is of course about media and the wars, but it's also personal. You are both Jihad, you are organic to Gaza, and Mona, as you shared, you are also organic to the places you're addressing, and would love to hear from you if you would like to close with any final words.
Maybe one thing I would say, and in relation to the project Jihad is working on, it's really beautiful to hear about all the grassroots work that people have been doing in trying to salvage as much as evidence and documentation of like the genocide in Gaza, and I say this because I am, I guess like sick with optimism, and despite all the heartbreak, the many people lost in this genocide in Lebanon and in Iran and so on and so forth. I do feel optimistic, to see that the U.S. hegemony being challenged beyond our imagination. I hope there is sometimes it takes a bunch of coincidences for history to take a new, route. So I think it's important to pay attention to all these changes and what new space do they bring? What new possibilities can they pose?
I think so. I second what Mona said, and again, when we are building the Gaza Genocide Center and building the database and looking at the patterns and looking at what happened, what has happened in Gaza, and what is happening now, and looking at this broader project of Israeli hegemony in the region, as expressed now through extreme violence and brutality, as we've seen as we see in Palestine and Lebanon and Iran and Syria and elsewhere. We're aware that this is not just limited to the region, and as Mouin said, this is a global phenomenon, and this is a universal battle, and whatever precedents are established in this moment are going to have major repercussions, not just for Palestinians or the people in Lebanon or the region. It will have consequences for all of humanity. So our region has become a major front for this clash over questions of rights, belonging, citizenship, basic recognition of people's humanity. And it's also become, unfortunately, a testing ground for these old and new tools of tyranny and power and control. So we do this work with the recognition of the universal nature of the fight that we're in, with the hope that nothing is guaranteed, but at least we go into this with the knowledge that someone has got to do something, and we're trying our best, hopefully.
Shukran. Thank you both
Thank
so
you
much.
both.
Absolutely. We would love to continue speaking. Jihad, you have joined us several times, and during the genocide in Gaza, and I'm deeply grateful to you and to all the people that are putting this project together. This is something that will also be a critical resource in the classroom and for journalists and researchers, and of course for the broader public. But it is the first genocide that is captured in 4K, and I can imagine how resourceful the project will be. And Mona, thank you so much again for joining us. Always on short notice, because things are changing quickly and we're trying to put things together. We did not address Lebanon this time, Mouin. We are going to be yelled at for that.
There's always a next time.
Say Lebanon more than one time, just in case. Yeah.
Lebanon.
No, but yeah, I mean, it's been a few days of the supposed ceasefire with more than 220 violations by Israel.
That's much better than last time.
Ceasefire. That's how it works, Habibi.
Ahsan shway, improvement. So shukran everyone, and
See you,
be
Mona.
safe. and we will
Bassam.
speak with you again. Ahlan wa sahlan.
Thank
Salam.
you.
Yeah.
Thank
Salam,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Salam.
Salam. All right, everyone. This is our media, or what did we call it, Mouin? Quick media or rogue media?
Something media.
This is our something media portion of Media Wars. I think we're calling it Rogue Media Wars. And we will actually simply go to various social media posts on X. Admittedly, Mu'in and I are we're not born after the 70s, so we actually not really good with IG. We're going to start with a very unfortunate and horrific killing of a journalist in Lebanon by Israel, Amal Khalil. Just when we were actually recording the show, Amal Khalil, a Lebanese journalist, was targeted today by the IDF in South Lebanon, together with other colleagues. Two were killed, one injured, and Amal is still under the rubble at the time of writing. The Red Cross tried to extract her, but they were targeted too by the Israelis and had to retreat. Any comments on this, Mouin? Given the preponderance of targeting of journalists everywhere by
Well,
Israel?
unfortunately and horrifically, Amal was murdered. She was alive, apparently could have been saved, but the Israelis made sure that she could not be extracted from under the rubble and taken for proper medical care, as this tweet shows. And her funeral has already been held. Unfortunately, it's part of a systematic pattern. In this case, we're talking about a journalist who, like so many others, was literally hunted down by the Israelis because she is a journalist. There has been nothing like it in history, where so many journalists are targeted and deliberately hunted down precisely because they are practicing their profession.
And this is another post about how this is no accident by Assal Rad, who is on our show today. Israel murdered her. Not, it wasn't an accident, and of course that includes a long line of journalists, more than 250 in Gaza and dozens and dozens in Lebanon. Let's move to the next post. Of course, the Wall Street Journal reports that Lebanese journalist Amal Khalil dies after attack. Unfucking believable. Teach this to your students, show it to your neighbors, how immoral and unethical US mainstream media are. Dies
And
after attack.
and the irony here is, if she had been killed by an American attack, the Wall Street Journal probably would have been comfortable saying Lebanese journalist killed
Absolutely.
in U.S. air raid, for example. But for Israel, there's always an exception. There's always a double standard. There's always a special pleading. Those Israel kills are deaded. They're not killed, and they die as a result of whatever carried out by whoever.
You want to read this for us, Habibi?
Al Jazeera's Heidi Pett says journalist Amal Khalid received threats from an Israeli WhatsApp number during the last war, warning her to stop reporting or leave Lebanon if she wanted her head to remain on her shoulders, before being killed today in an Israeli attack. And this, of course, reflects a consistent pattern where Israeli operatives send direct, personal, blood-curdling threats to journalists whose reporting they don't like, or perhaps more accurately, who report. We've seen it consistently in Gaza, where journalists or their family members are killed after failing to heed warnings that are sent to them by the Israelis.
We're going to go a bit quicker with a couple of other posts on the matter. This is Amal Khalil.
نواكب إعادة تأسيسهم ونحن رجعنا معهم، عم نواكب رجعتهم وعم نواكب إعادة تأسيسهم للحياة.
Mouin, this is you.
Yes, this is from Courtney Bonneau, a journalist working in Lebanon. It was wild for me today to be at the funeral of Amal and see journalists there who are mouthpieces for the very media outlets who are complicit in our murders. They're a fucking disgrace to the profession. And to see them stand next to her coffin and cry as if they haven't been whitewashing Israeli war crimes for years was mind-boggling. The audacity, the hubris. May all Israeli propagandists and their mouthpieces on the ground one day be put on trial for their crimes. And this is, of course, a direct reference to journalists such as the headline writer for the Wall Street Journal that we just reviewed.
All right, let's move to more on Lebanon.
You're muted, Bassam.
Addressing the Guardian addressing reports that the Israeli army demolished entire villages in southern Lebanon using large-scale explosive detonations, targeting areas such as Taiba, Naqoura, and Deir Syrian. This is a bit ago, but it's a compilation of the various videos that they probably captured
Systematic destruction
while demolishing humans and houses and villages to the point where nothing remains. And we will see a bit more on this. More than 62,000 housing units have been destroyed or damaged as a result of Israeli attacks on Lebanon during 6 weeks of war with Hezbollah, whatever that is, according to official figures. And the destruction is unprecedented, and it is meant at this point, it seems, to be irreversible. We will actually look at a couple of maps that have been discussed by many online that Google and Apple Maps have removed these villages from the maps. This is actually a very interesting background history on how this is not the first time or the second or the third, and it's not just a recent contemporary attempt by Israel to invade Lebanon. It started in 1948. So we'll take a
تذكر
listen.
كتب التاريخ اللبنانية أنه إسرائيل اجتاحت الأراضي اللبنانية لأول مرة سنة 78، ولكنها ما بتذكر أبداً الاجتياح الفعلي الأول للأراضي اللبنانية يلي بهيدا الاجتياح وصلت فيه إسرائيل إلى نهر الليطانة واستولت على 22 قرية لبنانية. طب ليش ما نذكر هيدا الاجتياح؟ لأن بكل بساطة الحكومة اللبنانية ما جابت سيرة هالاجتياح أمام مواطنينا، حتى أنه خبته عن المسؤولين الرسميين أنفسهم. بهيدا الفيديو رح نحكي عن هيدا الاجتياح وعن أول مجزرة ارتكبتها إسرائيل بلبنان، ورح نحكي عن خذلان الطبقة السياسية مجددا لشعبها وأرضها، وكيف هيدا الخذلان فتح الباب لكل الاجتياحات اللي اجت بعده. أثناء اجتياح العصابات الصهيونية للأراضي الفلسطينية
This is remarkable, not just because of the fact that many do not know that Israeli invasions of Lebanon started decades and decades ago, in fact, 78 years ago, but this is also about the complicity of the Lebanese political class in terms of their background, secret, behind closed doors, meetings and conversations with Israel several decades ago, which extended, of course, towards the contemporary period. And now we are seeing a version of it in Lebanon. So it is a really worthwhile to check out this video, Middle East from Middle East Observer. And we will make the videos and the links available for whatever purposes you'd like to see. This is another map from Apple showing that
A non-map.
a non-map. People apparently have checked it out and confirmed. I am not sure if this will continue to be the case. And this is another one, which is terrifying also with...
Israel pronounces an edict of disappearance on a number of villages, and U.S. tech companies immediately comply and remove them from their maps as if they never existed.
This is the bombing of a school in Lebanon. It must have taken a long time to detonate and prepare things, which means that, it was actually a safe space in general, which, of course, is what the Hezbollah will try to tell us, that this was some sort of
I think I see a Hamas tunnel.
Yeah, everyone does. Unfortunately, the Lebanese government has actually been beyond shameful, complicit, and so on. Here, the Lebanese government is affirming its full support for its Arab brothers, but in this case, and by brothers, I write here, they mean not the starving and genocided brothers in Gaza or in southern Lebanon, but the lucrative ones. So this is really about an incident that had taken place in Kuwait, and the Lebanese government has been shirking its responsibility, and that's an understatement of the century. Mouin, this is yours.
Israel seeks clarification from White House. Does declaration that further strikes on Lebanon are, quote, prohibited, unquote, mean Israel can continue to bomb Lebanon at will? And this is a reference, of course, to Trump's tweet that further bombings on further Israeli bombings, rather, on Lebanon are prohibited. To which Israel responded that it was going to seek clarifications, meaning, can we pretend this is an Israeli ceasefire where the only prohibitions are on the other side and we can continue to do as we please?
This is just for fun. Israel's invasion of Lebanon pictured here. It's not quite that funny in reality. All right, we're going to go next. We're going to move a little faster. Actually, we're going to go to media, which is what we are trying to do here. And here we go. There's no divide anymore on Israel within the Democratic electorate. CNN's Harry Enton reports voters are uniformly negative. Israel's net favorability is at least negative 54 points across young and older voters, as well as liberal and moderate Democrats. I'm going to show a couple and then we can say a couple words, Mouin. Actually, let me see. Let me just say a couple words about CNN. Our two favorite reporters in the universe and the history of humankind, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. Here, Jake Tapper, it seems that he can actually trace the facts professionally as a journalist in a decent manner on topics that do not have to do with Israel's pulverization of Gaza and Lebanon, which is good to know.
Supreme National Security Council, that's the country's highest military body. That statement spun the ceasefire. They claimed Iran had achieved victory, forcing the U.S. to accept its 10-point plan. It said in part, quote, the enemy in its unfair, unlawful, and criminal war against the Iranian nation has suffered an undeniable, historic, and crushing defeat, unquote. CNN reported that statement online, real time. There was also a separate, more measured statement from Iran's Minister of Foreign Affairs, which CNN published as well. At 7:42 p.m.
Essentially, when it doesn't have to do directly with Israel, this does have to do indirectly, I guess, with Israel, the war in Iran. But Jake Tapper becomes a professional journalist. Isn't
Yes,
that
more
amazing?
scrutiny for his own government, more criticism of his own country than of Israel.
That's what you were saying earlier, yes. And of course, Dana Bash here, this thing where Dana Bash pretends she is just giving context, but does not give the context that Netanyahu is wanted by the ICC and can travel to dozens of countries, is not convincing to anyone. Here, she says in response to a comment, and that's a quote: "For the record, Hamas is designated as a terror organization by the US, EU, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and others." And that's the norm. Teach to your students, neighbors, friends, colleagues, and all of that. This is a really, as this person says, Arnaud, that's extremely rare for U.S. treaty ally. It is actually a situation where the South Korean president addressing Israel, he wrote, "It's disappointing that you don't even once reflect on the criticisms from people around the world who are suffering and struggling due to your relentless anti-human rights and anti-international law actions." Actually, he was attacked viciously by so many of the bots and of course the Israeli Hezbollah. Anything on this, Mouin? Are you aware of this?
Yes, I've seen it. I'm just curious what Jake Tapper and Dana Bash had to say. Did they start advocating for withdrawing the ambassador from Seoul? You're muted.
Absolutely. All right. This is Ali Reza, who was with us during the last episode. Never mind the insanity of the proposition. It's also plain stupid, as if the US and Israel didn't already try assassinating Iranian leadership. Where did that get them? This is essentially the Washington Post calling through a piece within the Washington Post, an opinion piece, but they published this piece calling for assassinating foreign officials, and this ex member, or what do you say, ex what? It's not a member.
I'm not sure
Bruno
who or
Macias.
what he is.
He remembers a time when you would be
yes.
out on a terrorism
Sorry, I thought
watch
you meant
list.
the author of the Post editorial.
So he remembers a time when you would be out on a terrorism watch list for publishing this kind of stuff, which is essentially the title. Iran thinks it has leverage. Here's how Trump can prove it wrong. And it has to do with eliminating and assassinating Iranian leadership. This is published in the Washington Post.
Yeah, but not just leadership, the negotiators. This is like these stories you see from the 5th century, where one emperor sends an envoy to the other, delivers a message that the second king or emperor doesn't like. So he lops off the envoy's head, puts it in a box, and sends it back. That's essentially what's being proposed here.
Yep. Here, there's a lot recently about CBS's ratings. CBS boss Barry Weiss and Network's president slammed for rating woes at evening news CBS mornings, and the Variety magazine actually wrote that CBS News is experiencing a significant ratings decline, with CBS Evening News with Tony Dokupil, this jerk who was messing around with Tanahasi on his show, dropping below 4 million viewers. This is me saying it, this jerk. It wasn't Variety magazine. Dropping below 4 million viewers, hitting new lows in April 2026. The program saw an 8% dip in total viewers and a 16% drop in the key 25 to 54 demographic in early April, consistently trailing ABC and NBC. So the more the war in Iran moves forward, the more of a drop we see. We also, this is replicated, of course, in the broader context of the United States. Basically, Israel's favorability with the men under 50 has cratered. Glenn Greenwald writes, someone tell Larry Ellison, who bought everything, basically TikTok, CBS, and now apparently CNN and beyond. Someone should tell Larry Ellison to buy all the polling firms and hire some IDF soldier to run them, which is what sort of is happening elsewhere. That's the only way out of this continuing decline of Israel's favorability, which actually is consistently declining and has structural reasons for it, not just the despicable acts of Israel today, but learning about the history of
Everything else
Israel.
it's done.
Yeah.
And
Any
it's,
comments,
I mean,
Mouin?
yeah, imagine Israel is even losing among white male evangelicals, its most loyal constituency.
This is one of the anti-Hezbollah videos. As usual, pro-Israel and genocide enablers rushed to attack Espresso Weekly, who published an image of an Israeli facing a Palestinian, an Israeli soldier harassing a Palestinian woman. And the idea or the argument from the Israelis is that that was staged until the magazine released the video where the picture is extracted from which the picture is
Staged and
extracted.
photoshopped. Oh.
Yeah. So this is it. It's uncanny. It's unbelievable how every single piece of news is basically doubted by Israelis. Only later for us to find out the opposite. Here's another example. Stop lying. Here's an actual video posted by the local community in Dibble showing the Italian uniform replacing the statue. This is significant because the Israeli Defense Forces wrote that a short while ago, in full coordination with the local community of Dibble in southern Lebanon, the damaged statue was replaced by IDF troops. Unbelievable.
Yeah, but the problem for Israel is that for decades it has been able to just make shit up, just say whatever it wants, whatever needs to be said at a particular moment. It just says it, and it never had to worry about reality interfering. That's no longer the case.
And that's precisely why the reversal of these polls on Israel in the United States is impossible. I'm not saying it cannot fluctuate, but people are learning not just about atrocities, but they're learning about what they have not been able to find out. And I'm not excusing anyone, of course, because everything was available and hegemony is real. But with the breakdown of US hegemony globally, there is also a breakdown of US hegemony locally or domestically. And we are seeing the results of it. And this is why it is structural over and beyond the question of demographics, where younger people are actually not buying these myths. And notably, sons and daughters of American Zionists, whether Jewish or not, are actually, in many cases, leading the revolt. And that's one of the reasons why this is not just a change in mood.
And I'm actually a very strong advocate of Larry Ellison and Barry Weiss becoming the sole proprietors of the entirety of US mainstream media, because it's just chasing people away.
Absolutely.
And taking them to more neutral, more objective sources for their news. I think what Larry Ellison is doing, from my perspective, the best thing that could happen.
I mean, I see it as also moving things in the opposite direction, and that's why there is trepidation now. And I mean, we cannot get into this now, but there's a lot of talk about how to actually censor without appearing to be censoring on TikTok and beyond. Not that this will result in any kind of the opening of the gates of freedom or free speech. Mouin, this is yours.
The Hespera Symphony Orchestra has become exceptionally skilled at making global superstars out of artists whose careers it seeks to destroy. Its totalitarian campaigns targeting musicians for criminal prosecution, travel bans, and cancellations have backfired spectacularly. First Kneecap, then Bob Vylan, and now The Strokes. If you were unfamiliar with these bands and their principles before Israel's flunkies went after them, welcome to the club. Speaks for itself, no? You're muted.
Yes, and let's move now to another category, and that is going to be um, the United States. How fun! You ready, Mouin?
I'm ready.
All right, we're gonna start with something like very fresh, and that is basically a commentary on Donald Trump.
And before you do so, Bassam, I just need to interrupt and say that we've received word that Ahmad Shihab al-Din has been released from prison in Kuwait.
Yep.
So that's very
One piece of
encouraging
good
news.
news.
Of course, it's an issue that we've discussed in this episode.
Yeah, and of course, Ahmed is, has a long history in addressing the media, and it's significant that he was in Kuwait and he has ties, in terms of background history in Kuwait. So it remains to be seen, like the entirety of the terms on which this has happened.
Yes.
All right, this is basically a post. Essentially, it's an opinion piece in the Washington Examiner that says Trump is losing his mind. There's not much to read here, but it is not. What's significant is that it's no longer just critics of Trump that are addressing this. And in case people feel that the people around him are more sane, here's one for you.
Vance says the Pope should be more careful when talking about theology. That's verbatim a headline from the New York Times, and I said that this is definitely a headline of the year. Imagine, I think Vance converted to Catholicism yesterday or perhaps last week and is already pontificating to the Pope about, it's just too much. Only in America.
No, not only that, we have a show, as you know, Mouin, because you've been on it a couple of times, called Emergency Teachings. It's a
Yes.
satirical show that's outside the realm of our formal production of broadcasts. It's a satirical show, but we haven't been able to satirize recently as a result of things like this. I mean, you will find this in The Onion, and we will all think it's actually brilliant of The Onion to say that. So they're doing it for us, and I have no idea. ما بعرف,
I
ما
mean,
بعرف
if you
شو
want
بقول.
to satirize someone like Vance, you actually have to come up with something that is more absurd than Vance himself, and that's become virtually
Yes,
impossible.
it's
Yeah.
difficult. This is the American or the Free Press, Barry Weiss's Free Press, which was purchased for hundred
150
plus.
million.
Yeah. America has the luxury of walking away from conflict in Iran. Israelis aren't so lucky, writes Haviv Retig Gur. I can't pronounce the R right. So basically, Glenn Greenwald is commenting. In other words, this is a war for Israel. Some extremely rare, albeit unintentional, candor from Barry Weiss's Israeli state outlet. Isn't this remarkable that um, eh, there's a huge argument about the war and the motivations for it and Israel's role, and when you actually mention that, you're called anti-Semitic, or
Blood
by
libel.
those who don't want to use that argument or that accusation, you're understood as naive and not recognizing the independent reasons why the United States as a country, whether or not it supports Israel, wants to do that. And then there is something of the sort which actually continues. Um, so they said it. Does this make them anti-Semitic? That's just my quick commentary on them. And then there's just more of the same that refers to the question of the not demise but the quickly cratering views on Israel and the emergence of alternatives. My book is a new New York Times bestseller. This is Molly Crabapple, and a book about anti-Zionist Jews is number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. This is from Zachary Foster. Support for Zionism is collapsing at its fastest rate in history, and so on and so forth. So this is actually
quite amazing. I mean, it's
yeah.
a wonderful book, but it's also a book about a movement that ceased to exist decades ago. but because of this anti-Zionist Jewish legacy that it carries, it's generated enormous interest, not least among within U.S. Jewish youth who are increasingly either indifferent or even hostile to Israel and Zionism.
And the title of the book is "Here Where We Live Is Our Country."
Precisely.
Next, Haaretz publishes U.S. to bar World Cup attendees tied to anti-Semitism abroad, Envoy says. And my commentary is, so why are Trump and Musk allowed to return or re-enter? This World Cup thing, by the way, I know this is very silly and trivial and everything, but it's really pissing me and so many people off because we all want to watch the World Cup. It's almost the only remaining thing, one of the few remaining things that are pleasurable. And everything that's been taking place in the United States is hampering that. Iran might not participate. So many people are prevented from coming into the United States because of bogus reasons like this. But on top of that, Mouin, which is actually the big story that is sort of not upfront, is the emerging chaos in coordination, the emerging corruption in buying tickets and changing levels and stages that you supposedly thought you bought your tickets or that you actually paid for certain tickets at certain levels, only to find out that these are changed. So there is something like deeper than just bad
Yeah.
politics. There's
You
like an
thought
internal
Sepp
breakdown.
Blatter was corrupt? Welcome to Gianni Infantino.
Yep. It's beyond FIFA. Also, it's
Yeah.
it's administrative and logistical here in the United States, which is reflected in other sectors.
Well, the latest is that the U.S. has apparently, Italy once again failed to qualify for the World Cup. I think this is the third time in a row, even though it's a team that has won the World Cup, I think, 4 times. Iran did qualify. I think Iran has consistently qualified for the last 3 or 4 World Cups.
But it
And the
hasn't been
U.S.
decided if Italy's going to replace it because there were calls for Italy to replace it.
No, but the idea that the U.S. government is basically appealing to FIFA to disqualify a team that has qualified, Iran, and replace it with a team that hasn't qualified for purely political reasons. And quite frankly, I know many people say this could never happen, but with that dirty, rotten scoundrel, Gianni Infantino, in charge of FIFA, I wouldn't put anything past him.
If God is real, this would be the cover of their Bible today. The Economist publishes, a note: is bombing power plants and oil facilities a war crime? The answer is trickier than it seems. And The Onion, of course, this is what Assal has actually matched the two. How is an action determined to be a war crime? And the answer is on the basis of whether it was done to a white person.
Yes.
Yeah. Next, that's also from The Onion. Chuck Schumer. You want to read this because it's
Yes, Chuck Schumer says the American people deserve a president who can more credibly justify war with Iran. That, I think, is a very good reflection of the Democratic leadership's response to this entire fiasco. The U.S. apparently has a legislator. They say it's called Congress, but it has been invisible during this entire war. And Schumer is known as an avid supporter of all of this and has been working very hard to keep his party in line and behind Trump. Yeah.
I'm in constant disbelief as to how this person was atop the Democratic Party for so long, with so many people that you and I know that are quote unquote Democrats and that they despise Republican politics, especially domestically. And they are full of rage, right, towards the Republicans, but they're complacent vis-a-vis the leadership, which is precisely why it persists. This is Tucker Carlson saying that Mark Levin is not so subtly counseling President Trump to use nuclear weapons against Iran. And of course, this has been circulating for quite some time. Let's just take a quick listen because it's
Here's what
interesting.
Mark Levin said on his Easter weekend show about what we ought to do next in Iran. Watch.
And the casualty numbers, as horrible as any casualty is, need some context. Let's look at World War II. The Battle of the Bulge, 80,000 to 90,000 plus casualties, deaths and injuries and so forth. Nearly 10% of all the casualties in World War II happened at the Battle of the Bulge near the end of the war. The Battle of Okinawa, 50,000 plus casualties, over 12,000, nearly 13,000 killed on that island, which is what convinced Truman that we would lose a million men if we didn't drop the atomic bombs that we did. So this is a war or a peace mission to stop nuclear weapons that can blow away millions of Americans. Every bit as important as World War II. This is a crucially important military operation, war, call it what you want, peace mission. And we ought to be celebrating the success of our military, unifying around our military and our commander-in-chief.
Psycho.
And urging them to complete the task so our country is safe from nuclear weapons.
This is, again, the lesson that I keep repeating that Talal Asad taught us, that only liberalism is able and willing to destroy humanity in the hope of saving it, or to actually with the aim of saving it.
You know, the interesting thing here is that the U.S. is taking military action against Iran. You know, you can forget all Levin's nonsense. He has no clue what he's talking about. The U.S. has now launched a war against Iran on the pretext that it may in the future have a nuclear arsenal just like Israel. But when North Korea developed a nuclear arsenal, a nuclear weapons arsenal that was specifically developed with the United States in mind, the U.S. did nothing. Imagine, you know, you go to war because of a threat against a foreign country, but it doesn't occur to you to do that when your own national security is supposedly at stake.
Let's go to the next one. So this is former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. When you go to war hopefully with the support of your people. You have a defined threat. You have a clarity as to why you need to go to war, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the rest of it, you can listen to this at your own convenience. This is from Clash Reports on John Kerry. My comment here basically also refers to so many of these people who actually go into government, whether it's Stephen Miller, Anthony Blinken, or others in the United States and Israel, in this context specifically, who actually develop a conscience after they leave. So my comment here is teach structure to your students in political science and security studies, not just will. Structure is kind of sometimes missing, especially in certain dimensions of structure, is missing from a lot of what goes on, and how we see these matters. We see it as a matter of will. First he spoke. First he didn't speak out, and now he's speaking out. When you work with the U.S. or any government, actually, you must put most of your principles aside until you get out. Looks like this is yet another guy who got out and spoke his mind. Structure inside government, will outside government. Any comments, Mouin?
Oh, I think that sums it up very well.
This is Murtaza saying the Iranians actually requested to negotiate with J.D. Vance for a few reasons. And, this is actually a kind of worms, because he addresses this issue as after previously dealing with 2 Israeli agents, they requested to speak with someone who might be an American. And then, of course, the response from another person, Arash Azizi, says, no, This is not about them being agents. This is just Americans having different preferences. And then Murtaza Hussein responds by saying he clearly had ideological affinities and personal connections to Israel and so on and so forth. And he provides some background. Anything to say on this, Mouin? In
Yeah, it
general, not
seems.
necessarily this particular moment.
Yeah, but we see this also, with respect to envoys appointed with respect to Palestine or Lebanon under both Democratic and Republican administrations, and in terms of diplomatic postings and so on. It seems having a personal commitment to Israel is a prerequisite for serving as an even-handed mediator between Israel and its adversaries. I mean, look, for example, now the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who basically feels more loyal to Israel than to the United States, and is often quite rightly derided as the second Israeli ambassador to Washington, has now been appointed to also broker these Israeli-Lebanese talks. It's beyond words. It's almost loyalty to Israel is a prerequisite for serving as a mediator between Israel and its enemies.
This is yours, Mouin.
A poster at a U.S. high school that celebrates rather than condemns Israel is torn down and deposited in a urinal. The action was almost certainly taken by students seeking to express their opposition to the Gaza genocide. A picture of the offending poster in the urinal is posted on social media. A schoolgirl who is not accused of participating in the flyer's removal approvingly posts this image. Israel flunkies respond with a campaign demanding that the girl's father, who is not known for having any views on the Middle East and has in fact condemned the action, be relieved of his leadership role in the school board. As the saying goes, punish one, teach 100. Zionism is a totalitarian movement.
Self-explanatory, right?
I think so.
Very quickly, I know you got to go. This is another one of yours, an important post about the extraordinary sacrifices Israel has made over the years as a result of its selfless willingness to accept several $100 billion in U.S. taxpayer funds. The aid almost ruined Israel, yet saved the U.S. from certain destruction. No other country has ever proven as willing as Israel to accept U.S. taxpayer funds. So stop whining and start showing a little gratitude that Israel continues to be willing to take your tax dollars.
We're always reminded that it's Israel doing the U.S. the favor because much of this money is spent on U.S. defense contractors. So it seems the only way the U.S. government can subsidize its defense companies is by giving the money to Israel. Otherwise, apparently, it would be prohibited from doing so. And here's another one. Your daily reminder that for many decades, Israel's military might has been constrained solely by an avalanche of U.S. advanced weaponry and a tsunami of U.S. taxpayer dollars. Were it not for U.S. opposition, Israeli forces would today be triumphantly parading through the streets of Tehran, Ankara, London, Brussels, Moscow, Beijing, and, of course, Johannesburg. Someone needs to teach these Americans how to show proper gratitude. Again, this is some Israel flunky basically saying, if we're cut loose by the U.S., we can finally display our power properly instead of having to act like wimps because the U.S. is preventing us from winning our wars.
And this is your last one.
More evidence Christian Zionists are becoming an endangered species. Pretty soon, this cult will be reduced to asylum claims by Arabs seeking a better life in the West. And this references Trita Parsi here has relayed the public opinion poll showing that even among young evangelicals, Israel's support for Israel is cratering relative to where it was just a year or two ago.
All right. So we are moving to a couple of quick segments. This one is on Iran. We've bombed 763 schools and 316 health facilities per the Iranian Red Crescent. Monstrous, indefensible crimes. This is from Crystal Ball, Iran's schools and hospitals in ruins, Times analysis shows. And it's a copy from the Israeli playbook in Gaza and, of course, Lebanon. And here it is with full U.S. participation, active participation in Iran. Glenn Greenwald says if you ask 15 people who are MAGA followers what the Iran war aims was, Iran war aim was, you'll hear 15 different answers because Trump gave a different goal every day. Here's what he said was his main goal on the day the war started. Trump says on the day the war started, freedom for Iran. I can't finish reading it. Is goal of major military operation. Yalla. This is Assal Rad again. This should be, or this should help US-Iran talks and clearly isn't meant to derail the ceasefire. Mossad says Israel will keep trying to topple Iran's government, which is very, it's just a side piece of news. And the idea here, of course, is every time somebody says something about Israel's part in launching this war, there is all sorts of discourse and attacks against you with multiple arguments. Not all basically accusing you of being anti-Semitic, but some of them do, and others basically consider you a poor analyst, except that the Israelis keep helping us make the argument. Majority of Israelis oppose Iran ceasefire and expect war to resume. I mean, this is from April 13th, and it actually is another way of demonstrating why this is not just Israeli leadership, but it's also reflects overwhelming public opinion in Israel. Professor John Mearsheimer, also from the class report, it is widely recognized that it is the Israelis who led us into this disastrous war. It's the Israelis who are preventing us from getting a ceasefire. The American public's views on Israel are undergoing a sea change. This situation only gets worse with the passage of time. When a country loses a war, everybody goes back to the causes. When you win, you celebrate. When you lose, you ask, how did this happen? And of course, this is something that a lot of people will criticize by doubting the credentials of Professor John Mearsheimer while supporting the credentials of everybody and their mother on the other side, from Thomas Friedman to, I don't know, I'm not going to name names here of political scientists that actually try to support Israel's arguments. But it's really shameful when people, take someone of this stature and try to reduce him to propagandistic motives. Oh, I should say, at a time when everything he is saying is actually supported by what is going on in Israeli channels, basically live TV channels and social media posts and official publications. This is Amir, again, I think from Germany, writing from a failed coup to a failed regime change operation and a failed attempt to kill diplomacy and send Iran, an isolated and sanctioned nation, back to the Stone Age. We have arrived at a point where Iran has now dictated the terms for a ceasefire to the United States, has managed to put a leash on Israel as the first and only country in the world to protect its allies, has forced the U.S. to unfreeze Iran's assets and perhaps soon lift all sanctions, and Trump to praise to praise Iran to save his own face. Meanwhile, Iran has maintained its sovereignty and completely restored its image on the world stage like a phoenix rising from the ashes. This is basically a statement from someone who is certainly, like most of us, opposed to this barbaric war, and is Iranian, lives, I think, in Germany, and concludes by saying, as it stands today, this will go down history as one of the greatest strategic achievements. And it is actually a strategic achievement because it was so unforeseen. And when you compare the military might, on paper, of both the United States and Israel with Iran's, you cannot escape this kind of conclusion regarding this the state of play today between Iran and both Israel and the United States. Here, a telling contrast on CNN. This is actually somebody on CNN speaking truth for once, because sometimes they do that. An expert correspondent, Nick Robertson, reveals the Iranian delegation offered multiple peace proposals, but the Trump administration keeps shifting the goalposts. Washington is actively sabotaging diplomacy to prolong a disastrous regional war. It actually does merit listening.
You've got on the Dove side in Tehran right now, well, that's the Doves that were here in Islamabad over the weekend negotiating with J.D. Vance, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. So that was happening. And what are the Doves who went back to Iran saying now? They're saying, look, we put forward, this came from the leader of the delegation, the parliamentary speaker on the Iranian side. He said, we put forward, these numbers, 106 different proposals. The problem is the U.S. didn't accept them. The U.S. needs to trust us. We heard from the foreign minister from Iran who said, look, the U.S. keeps shifting the goalposts, which is sort of a recurring narrative here, that the U.S. kept shifting the goalposts on what was achievable, and the Iranians saying pretty much that they agreed and wanted to get this deal done. So this is you've got.
Yep. So this is actually something that has been happening not just since the beginning of this war in late February, but also since 2016, since Trump took power. And the goalposts keep shifting to the point where it seems to many who are following that the end result or the final stage of the goalposts might actually resemble the original stage of the goalpost that actually was determined by a prior president. We will see. Yes, and this is a response to Iran in the last 47 years has never negotiated in good faith. Amir again says, yes, we all remember how Iran violated the JCPOA, which I was just referencing from Obama's days, and then bombed the U.S. twice during negotiations. He's basically satirizing the this representative, Don Bacon, by saying, we all remember how Iran violated the agreement and bombed the U.S. twice during negotiations. We all are brain-dead lunatics living in an alternative universe. True. This is another video. I'll let you enjoy it.
Yeah. Keep that same energy. You ain't nothing but a fraud. Yo, call him what he is. Liar! Hey. Yeah. Hey, loser, come closer. I'm the exposer. Fake billionaire, your whole empire opposer. You step down. Another liar takes the crown. The whole system is a circus. You're just a clown. You drop fake news sitting high in your tower. Morally bankrupt, just drunk on the power. You're fired. Played your last trump card. No more aces, boy, you're discarded. Look in the mirror. Tell me what you see. Big ego crushed. Fake reality. We covered in stone. We spell it in the fire. Ready for the truth. Call him the liar. Labor of blood on your pride. Island Epstein secrets you hide. All your crimes buried deep inside. Rotten systems, you're gonna slide. L-I-A-R. Yeah, we see you. L-I-A-R. We don't wipe us off the socials, yeah, you're hiding in fear, trying to silence every voice you don't wanna hear. From the MJ to Diana, yeah, we see how it goes. The system buries light, but the shadow always shows. Illuminati talks blood and the perjury, you lie, but the mission, it's Epstein fury. Yeah, round fool, yeah, the records are proof. Now we expose it all, this is April truth. Look in the mirror, tell me what you see.
All right, so we will actually move to another category altogether, and it's basically a combination of things that will include Europe, the West Bank, Palestine, and the question of the discourse that tries to criminalize critique of Israel. Let's move to the miscellaneous categories. Here we go. So first, starting with Gaza. This is from Mouin, a new analysis published by UN Women shows that more than 38,000 women and girls, including over 22,000 women and 16,000 girls, were killed in Gaza between October 2023 and December 2025, representing an average of at least 47 women and girls killed per day. And this is from unwomen.org. You can check it out. It's a horrifically devastating report. This is from the West Bank. Israel approving the construction of new West Bank settlements at an unprecedented rate because it knows its window of impunity is closing. This point cannot be underestimated. We saw it in Gaza, where Israel wanted to do the maximum barbaric damage before things may come to an end. They still haven't, but they have definitely been truncated to an extent. And then it continues, or the headline by Mondoweiss continues, especially if Iran emerges intact from the war and the Republicans lose the U.S. midterms, both of which are more likely than anyone has ever thought, including critics of the war, or most critics of the war, let's say. This is a genuinely impressive comment by Mouin. He writes, even 5 years ago, the great and the good would have been falling over themselves to get an invitation to speak at a conference like this, even if only for 2 minutes, to express their support and endorsement. Prominent politicians and officials, in this case referring to the people who actually joined, celebrities and academics, anyone with a career to promote would have gone out of their way to be seen and hopefully heard, as well at a gathering such as this. And now in 2026, what is the closest this organization can get to a keynote speaker demonstrating how widespread its support runs? Ben Shapiro. The remainder of the lineup only confirms this as an event in which the indoctrinated preach to the doctrinaire in their ever-diminishing bubble. This is the World Symposium Against Anti-Zionism. If you want to check it out. I mean, they're talking about all of us who are, who have a conscience. On Sunday, May 17th in Toronto. Ahlan wa sahlan. So that's all there is to it here. Nothing more to see. And this is a quick note, starting with the, let me see right here, actually. Let me stay with Gaza. I think we went to another category. Apologies for that. We'll go back to Gaza. And this is Aaron Mate sharing that this outlet is villain, a cartoonishly evil one, referring to the Free Press. There's a new type of book out here, one that tries to make everything in the world about Gaza and Israel, introducing a new dark political parable with a familiar villain, Jews. This is actually the quote from the Free Press. This is essentially looking at books on the genocide in Gaza and making them all out to be ultimately interested in pointing to Jews as villains. And this is nobody has any words for this, right? This is like saying books on the Holocaust are written by people who want to make out the Germans to be villains. It actually is beyond immoral. Put hypocrisy aside, and it's basically what the free press peddles in. This is Omar Hamad, April 21st. For him, it will remain etched in history forever. Alhamdulillah, we have officially opened the first library to be built during the genocide in Gaza. He survived even after all his expectations had utterly failed. He never imagined that he would stand here among us today, celebrating this remarkable feat. Omar Hamad is somebody that I have interviewed in the past on another series called Gaza on My Mind, and I am in touch with him, and we will be speaking with him shortly about his initiative and more. This is Assal, Assal in Arabic, Assal in Persian. I guess they don't pronounce the A. I don't know why. What happened? This should have been this should have been headline news in every major media outlet today, but they want you to forget Gaza. So it gets zero coverage. And the headline is by the United Nations, human development setback 77 years as recovery costs rise to $71 billion. Dropsite news, a new Gaza Humanitarian Foundation whistleblower, David McIntosh, a contractor with Safe Reach Solutions, says he saw Israeli soldiers regularly use lethal force against unarmed aid seekers, including a 12-year-old who they shot and killed, likely killed. The report from Rana Natur. This is a really important report from Middle East Eye that I urge you to check out. It's detailed and it's sourced. And it's just one of the many things one can look at as a way of documenting some of the claims that so many of us make. And they're not even claims when the videos expressly and explicitly confirm and ground them. Let's
for the Gazans coming to collect aid.
There still hasn't been any accountability in the over 2,000 aid seeker deaths and 19,000 injuries near GHF sites and routes. And even though many died from gunshot wounds, the Israeli military and GHF still deny responsibility and intentionality in any of this. And even though GHF shut down in October, the creators of GHF are now building out Gaza's new aid system, which may just be a GHF 2.0. David McIntosh is only the second named GHF contractor to speak out publicly, and what he told me is disturbing.
One time I witnessed this, there was a group of 3 lads, they got out of the rebellion, they just dart to another mound, okay? Machine gun fire, boom, straight away onto them. Then sniper fire, then a tank round. They're not moving, they're hiding behind this mound. Then a drone comes over, drops a grenade.
McIntosh told me about one incident of an Israeli sniper who shot a young boy, he believes fatally, after an aid distribution. McIntosh says he detailed the witness accounts of 2 of his SRS colleagues immediately after in this report he sent to higher-ups who never even followed up.
Higher-ups who never even followed up. A recurring story. All right, Gaza notifications breaking. Leaked footage reveals a new crime unfolding in Gaza. Israeli forces are demolishing one of the last remaining schools, deliberately wiping out what survives of Gaza's education system. This is happening under a so-called ceasefire. I don't know what to say. This is, I write here in reference to the infamous Israeli reservist and Rabbi Avraham Zarbiev is a military bulldozer driver who took part in the demolition of hundreds of homes in the Gaza Strip. He has called for Gaza's homes to be leveled to the ground. And I simply write, watch this carefully for the record. Israel wanted to destroy Gaza regardless of Hamas as we have been saying from the first moment they launched their genocidal war in Gaza. This is just one of myriad concrete examples. You can find these
כל
videos
פשוט בית אחרי בית. בית ליח ובית חנון לדעתי זה החמצה, חצי הרוס, לא לגמרי, היינו בדרך לשם, הגיע ההסכם, אנחנו עם הדינאים כבר הגענו לפאתים, הסרטונים האחרונים, פה ראית שאני כבר בפאתים של בית חנון, בית ג'בל. בית חנון ובית ליה. בית ליה. אני אמרתי למ"פ שלי, אני כאילו מנגן על הדינאים, מנגן עליו. כאילו, אתם לא מבינים מה זה להפיל בית 7 קומות, 6 קומות, 5 קומות. יש להם אלפי הרוגים שהכלבים והחתולים אכלו אותם כי אף אחד לא אסף אותם.
Is the lesson that Israel can still kill people and you'll call it a ceasefire? That's from Assal Rad again. Gaza marks 6 months of ceasefire that may offer lessons for the Iran war. Are you serious? I mean, this is actually a title by the Associated Press. It's almost like there's one war room that includes Israel, the United States, and the American mainstream media. This is just more about President Israel Herzog holds up a copy of Hitler's Mein Kampf, claiming it was found in a child's room in Lebanon. And Nassim Talib writes, there's a copy of it in the New York Public Library. Should they start destroying it and killing visitors? There's so much about these books randomly appearing almost everywhere. And there's actually some reports that trace some of these cases to actually capture the extent to which these findings are authentic. I will actually stop here and move to the West Bank, where we talked about the building and construction of new West Bank settlements within the window that many in Israel, especially Smotrich and company, feel they have a limited time to accomplish the most building of colonial settlements before any kind of deal is reached. Where are we? We go back. Okay. Now this is a very interesting video, which is the current video.
Stop,
You can speak with him? Yes. Tell him if he's not going now, I'm going to...
You have to explain why. It's his house.
Because the violence, okay?
This is very violent.
Who is doing the violence? Towards women? Towards women? Why are you doing this? Why are you supporting this? Why are you supporting this? How can you support this? Do you think this is normal? It's completely disgusting. It's abnormal. This behavior? Are you serious? Like, what the fuck? Like, are you serious? This is disgusting. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. We will talk. We talk to the police. Fatma.
They told us we could be here.
Yes, you can film me. I don't give a shit. Your face will be everywhere. Millions of you, I promise you that.
Normal person, stop killing children. Zionist, that's anti-Semitic. And this is essentially an Australian Jewish Association depicting this as an example of anti-Semitism in New Zealand, because people had placed a note on a billboard saying "Stop killing the killing of children, demand a ceasefire," and that's considered anti-Semitic in New Zealand as well. So please rejoice if you are of the opinion that this only happens in the United States and Europe. A recent European study found that a significant share of people in Central and Middle Eastern Europe believe Israel's actions against Palestinians are similar to those of Nazi Germany against Jews, with Poland recording the highest level of agreement. Yep. I mean, this speaks for itself. Israel's actions against Palestinians are similar to those of Nazi Germany against Jews, and these are comments and opinions coming from the people that were affected by the Holocaust and their descendants. The Holocaust memory demands we oppose turning the state of the Jews into the state of executioners. That's by Haaretz. Of course, if we didn't show the title, this of course would be viewed as an anti-Semitic title, which is, again, day after day, month after month, year after year, this accusation has become so emptied, and in fact has become actually a source of suspicion of the people making the accusation. Right after the genocide started, I co-wrote an article with Sinan Antoun in Mondoweiss about the license people give themselves to make that accusation, and how, besides being, fraudulent and cowardly and racist, ultimately, because you will not accept any critique of Israel unless you won't accept any critique of Israel because you assume that the critics actually are racist. That in itself is a form of racism, not least it coming from people who defend Israel, a country who actually claims to be speaking on behalf of all Jews. And that article still survives today, and the arguments made therein, you can check it out, are unfolding before our eyes regarding what has happened to the reputation of the state that has been pushing this campaign. Glenn Greenwald, look how desperate the pro-Israel lobby is. They now have to convince Americans that Bernie Sanders is an anti-Semite because he does not want to pay for Israel's military. Again, unbelievable. There's nothing to say, nothing more to say, and there's a lot more that I will not actually go through. Finally, we will do a quick round on Europe. The Prime Minister of Italy finally says Italy is suspending its defense agreement with Israel as global protests mount over the US-Israel war in Iran. Of course, this is a development after some recalcitrance. And this is, again, viewed as funny. This woman is a genius. This is from Tita Parsi, and the parody of democracy that Germany has become, and Germany has become a parody of democracy. I mean, I'm not going to comment very much about democracy in Europe or the United States in general, but she got arrested, and or it was claimed by the police that she would get arrested if she says from the river to the sea. So this protester asked if she could say from the river to the beach, and of course, the police didn't think it was funny. European petition exceeds 1 million signatures to suspend EU-Israel agreement. I'm not sure how far this would go, but it's important to see that these movements in Europe are growing, not just in the United States, and there is a good chance that there will come a time when there will be a critical mass both in Europe and the United States that will actually begin changing policies, not just public opinion. But do not hold your breath. Do not hold your breath. It's going to take a long time, and it's not going to happen automatically. Italy repudiates the war again. Very interesting commentary here by somebody who is speaking their mind. I would like to play this.
esprimere la nostra più ferma condanna, che sono certa sarà unanime in quest'Aula, per l'attacco del Presidente Donald Trump alla Presidente del Consiglio Giorgia Meloni, per avere doverosamente espresso solidarietà a Papa Leone. E voglio dire che l'Italia è un paese libero e sovrano e che la nostra Costituzione è chiara: l'Italia ripudia la guerra. Nessun capo di Stato straniero può permettersi di attaccare o minacciare o mancare di rispetto al nostro paese e al nostro governo. Siamo avversari in quest'Aula, ma siamo tutte e tutti cittadini italiani e rappresentanti degli italiani, e non accetteremo attacchi o minacce al governo e al nostro paese. Chiediamo su questo davvero una condanna unanime. Grazie.
And with this, we end our segment on rogue media wars. This is the media/social media component. Thank you all for joining us for this third episode, and see you next time.
What is this? I can't say that. Yeah. Bring me extra. I love Arabic. I enjoy it.
استأصلوا جذورنا وهدموا بيوتنا وجرموا وجودنا وزيفوا أصولنا فرقوا أحبابنا وذبحوا أطفالنا واسترخصوا دماءنا وشيطنوا ثوارنا وهدموا بيوتنا وجرموا وجودنا وزيفوا أصولنا فرقوا أحبابنا وذبحوا أطفالنا واسترخصوا دماءنا وشيطنوا ثوارنا اسرقوا علومنا وجهلوا شعوبنا وعذبوا نفوسنا واستنكروا حقوقنا استعمروا بلادنا وعينوا حكامنا وانهبوا خيراتنا واحرقوا أشجارنا. فمن تكون دوننا فمن تكون دوننا فمن تكون دوننا فمن تكون عذابنا تجاهلوا دموعنا أغمضوا عيوننا وجوهوا وجوهنا وانكروا شعورنا دمروا أحلامنا وصنموا أسامنا وأظلموا سماءنا اقتلوا سلامنا سنبقى في مقامنا ويبقى فينا حبنا. فمن تكون دوننا ولن تكون دوننا ولن تكون دوننا. وهدموا بيوتنا وجرموا وجودنا وزيفوا أصولنا فرقوا أحبابنا وذبحوا أطفالنا واسترخصوا دماءنا وشيطنوا ثوارنا اسرقوا علومنا وجهلوا شعوبنا وعذبوا نفوسنا واستنكروا حقوقنا استعمروا بلادنا وعينوا حكامنا وانهبوا خيراتنا واحرقوا أشجارنا فجروا ديارنا وكذبوا أقوالنا وجاهدوا أوجاعنا واستصغروا عذابنا تجاهلوا دموعنا أغمضوا عيوننا وجوهوا